The first recipe in today's video is for this Marry Me shrimp pasta. I have tried the Marry Me chicken and I feel like at this point almost everybody has, and that recipe is absolutely amazing. But if you're like me and sometimes you get sick of chicken, try it with shrimp. It is absolutely amazing. One thing I do recommend with this recipe is getting all of your prep work done before you start cooking because everything goes really quickly, which is great for a weeknight meal. So I'm going to start out by mincing a few cloves of garlic, and then I'm also going to take some sun-dried tomatoes and I'm going to thinly slice them. Now, I did get a lot of oil out on my sun-dried tomatoes, so I did just take a paper towel and lightly blot them just so they weren't too oily going into the pan later on in the recipe. And like I said, I'm just going to thinly slice those. You can dice them up, you can leave them bigger, just based on your personal preference. And then for the shrimp, you want to have the shrimp peeled and deveined. I'm going to season them with some salt and pepper, as well as some paprika and some garlic powder. Now, I did not measure any of the seasonings, but you absolutely can. I will have both of these recipes linked in my description box below, so they do have exact measurements if you prefer to cook with exact measurements. But for something like this, I kind of just go with what my heart tells me. And then I'm just going to give those a good toss just to evenly distribute all of the seasoning on the shrimp. Now in a large saute pan, I am just going to add in a tablespoon of butter, and the recipe calls for also a tablespoon of olive oil. The oil that the sun-dried tomatoes were in was olive oil, so I just used a tablespoon of that oil. I thought it would be a great way to use it because there was excess oil in that container. And then also it's just going to help bring that flavor into the dish even more. Once that was heated up nice and hot and the butter and the oil were melted together, I just added my shrimp in, tried to move them around into an even layer. So you're going to want to use a pan size based on how much shrimp you're cooking, just to accommodate that. If you're making this for a large group of people, then maybe do it in batches if you don't have a large enough pan to do so. But you want to cook it for about a minute to a minute and a half on each side. So I let the first side go for about a minute, and then I went ahead and flipped it over. And then we're going to remove this from the pan. Most people know, obviously, you don't want to overcook shrimp because then the texture gets too rubbery and that is not appetizing. So as long as you don't overcook it, I love shrimp, but if it's overcooked, it's not for me. Now you will see for this recipe, I did not use, it called for a pound of shrimp. I did not do a full pound of shrimp because this was just for my husband and myself, but I did make the full recipe for the sauce. So you're going to see that here in a minute. I'm going to just go ahead and add in my minced garlic and my sun-dried tomatoes once the shrimp came out of the pan. The reason that I made the full thing of sauce is because I could easily saute shrimp, but I feel like reheated shrimp just to me is not as good. But I wanted to have this so we could easily heat that up with some fresh shrimp if we wanted the leftovers. Once you let the garlic cook for a minute, I went ahead and added in a tablespoon of tomato paste. Now the recipe says to add it later on, which you can totally do, but for me, I wanted to add it in that step. I think it really helps develop the flavor of the tomato paste. And then I went in with a tablespoon of flour. Now, if you're used to making like gravies, things like that, you're going to be a little concerned and think this looks pretty dry, but just trust the process. This is not a gravy, it's for the sauce. So you just want to let that cook for about a minute just to let the raw flour taste come off, and then you're going to go in with some chicken broth. I do the better than bouillon, that's why I went in with water and then the better than bouillon. And then you just want to let this kind of simmer until it starts to thicken up, and here you can see that's thickened up a little bit there. And then you're going to go in with some heavy cream. Give that a good stir, and then you're going to let this cook, kind of simmer and thicken up again for about 3 minutes. Now, I'm going to be serving this over some gluten-free pasta. I love the Great Value brand. Actually, both recipes in this video use the Great Value brand. It's one of my favorite ones that I've found, but you can serve this over regular pasta, obviously. You could do like zucchini noodles. You can serve it over just like vegetables if you didn't want to have any sort of a pasta. I think that it would be absolutely delicious. And then we just finished it off with some Parmesan cheese. Let that melt into the sauce, get nice and thick and creamy, and then I'm going to add the shrimp back in, give them a toss just so that way they can heat back up, let all those flavors come together for about like 15 seconds, and then I just went ahead and tossed it with my pasta. Like I said before, I highly recommend giving this recipe a try. It is the perfect weeknight meal because this comes together so quickly. Speaking of easy weeknight meals, this recipe for gluten-free hamburger helper is a one pot meal, and I love one pot meals. I don't know who doesn't. It just makes your evening so much quicker and simpler because you have a lot less dishes. I'm going to start out with 1 pound of ground beef and just break that up and let that cook down fully. You just want to let that get nice and brown. And then depending on your fat ratio in your meat, you want to drain off any excess grease that you may have in the meat. Once I have that drained, I'm just going to add in a tablespoon of almond flour. You could do regular flour or almond flour depending if you're gluten-free or not. And then for the spices, I'm going to add in a little bit of paprika, garlic powder, and onion powder. Like I said in the beginning of the video, this recipe will be linked in the description box below. Then you want to add in a 1/4 cup of some tomato sauce. At this point, I just gave it a good toss because I didn't want my spices to burn. But we're going to go in right away with some beef broth. And same thing as the first recipe, I used the better than bouillon. So I just added the water and then added the beef better than bouillon. Gave that a good stir until it broke up. It will break up pretty quickly once that starts to heat. Then to that, you're going to add in your pasta. This is the Great Value gluten-free pasta. It's just a different shape. Give that a good stir, and then you're going to cover this and let it simmer for 12 minutes. And here I'm showing you a picture of that pasta. You want to let this simmer for 12 minutes and then it will be completely cooked. That sauce is going to absorb into the noodles. A little steamy here, but it's going to absorb that sauce. The flavor is absolutely amazing. And the last thing that you're going to do is just finish it off with some shredded cheese. I just went ahead and shredded up a block of cheddar cheese, and then I just needed a cup for this recipe. Give that a good stir until it melts in there, and I am telling you, this was so quick to make. It was one pot, so it was very few dishes to clean that weeknight, and it was so good. And I feel like hamburger helper is something that's so comforting, but using it out of a box, you don't know all the ingredients, and there's lots of preservatives. So making it yourself, you just feel better about eating this comforting dish. And then like you just saw there, I did season with some salt and pepper at the end just to taste, and then you are ready to serve dinner. I really hope that you enjoyed these recipes. I definitely enjoyed sharing them with you. Make sure that you subscribe if you have not done so already. I would love for you to join my YouTube family here, and I will see you in the next video.